Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to change up the agenda. Is this on?
Doesn't seem like it.
Tim? Hello? Okay, we're on now. We're going to change up the agenda and move the police recognition to after the Saline Main Street update. Do we have any other additions or changes to the agenda? If not, do we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Moved to her, second Gearba. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have no absences tonight. And Bob Rice is here to talk about the Saline Celtic Festival.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the council. I'd like to, before I get started tonight on the presentation itself, I would like to just make recognition to my colleagues on the executive committee, all the chair people, and all the volunteers that participated this year in the Saline Celtic Festival, and express my appreciation for all their help. The results and activities that we're going to present tonight certainly could not have happened without the many hands and feet and hearts and souls of the people who put forward their efforts for that several days. In 2011, following a couple of meetings here with the council itself, the executive committee of the Saline Celtic Festival started to make some changes in the festival itself. We recognized that there needed to be further commitment, there needed to be further focus, there needed to be adjustments to how we undertook the efforts in both the planning and operation of the festival itself. We certainly took notice of that. We went back into our rooms and started to take effect into that and presented a festival in 2011, which I believe started to at least scratch the surface, if not make a little bit of a dent into those objectives. We did a fairly good job, not a great job in 2011, nevertheless one that showed some improvement on the efforts and certainly showed that we had a pretty good idea on the pathway for the future. As we went forward in 2012, our focus was really on two main things: to be a little bit more efficient in how we did things and to try to maximize some of the things that we did within the 2011 festival itself. We wanted to try to improve on attendance. We wanted to try to improve on the financials themselves, on the overall awareness, both here in the city of Saline and outside the outlying communities, and also to improve on our overall entertainment, that it was a little bit of a different festival. It wasn't the same old, same old. And we wanted to try to actively solicit more help and more people to come to the festival so that all of these could be achieved. This actual slide is one from the 2011 presentation, with the exception of the notations on the right-hand side. So just to give you an idea, in 2011, a couple of our objectives were less dependent, less costs on the city of Saline. That was done. We utilized less of DPW this year and more focus on our own efforts in getting the festival up and running and broken down at the end. A foundation to build reserves to survive a bad year. You'll see the financials as we move forward into the presentation, but that was accomplished. A continued business approach to the festival operations to evaluate all the activities that are going on there and see how we can improve things and how we can maximize our efforts. Better marketing so we can have an impact on the gate, on the 5K walk and run. You may have seen this year we took a couple of different approaches. We put up large billboards on I-94, would be east of Chelsea, and we had another billboard on US 23 just outside of the Willis Road exit there. And both of those we found to be very, very effective. A lot of people came to the festival this year notating the billboards that we had. And we were able to accomplish those billboards at very low cost by utilizing the not-for-profit rates of the foundation and getting great contractual accomplishments with that. To increase our corporate sponsorships, again, not just the businesses within Saline, but we made a goal last year to try to find some larger, more national scale corporate sponsorships. of which we did accomplish that, and we'll speak to those in a few minutes. We wanted to incorporate a downtown activity, and we did that. We incorporated a Celtic night on the Thursday night summer music series before the actual festival itself, and incorporated both a demonstration of the Highland game activities as well as one of the Celtic bands that performed. Going back up to the top, product line management mentality, evaluate everything. There were certain things that have been there in the past that did not make the cut for this year, and we're going to continue to do those activities as we move into future years. And we wanted to have an application of grants, and we were able to accomplish that. We did achieve one grant there for $3,000 that added to the overall revenue into the festival. So all in all, every single one of the objectives and exposures that we created there were accomplished for 2012. We really created sort of a concept of the year of change for Saline Festival 2012. We wanted to create a concept of a new festival comes to Saline. It's not the same old, same old. We start off, first of all, by moving a lot of things. For those that did come, you'll see that a lot of the tents changed position. You didn't just walk in and turn left right into the beer tent. You had to walk a little ways. You had to go through a gate to get into a larger area there. And we moved a lot more activities around so that would be more exposure of the merchants, of the food. We kept the kids area up front away from the consumption of alcohol areas. So a lot of new things that we changed to make the festival new and exciting. We had headliner entertainment. We brought in several new headliners that were nationally and internationally known. And I think that was certainly representative in the actual attendance both on Friday and Saturday night. If you happen to be there during the time period that Eileen Ivers was playing, I don't think I've ever seen the music tent as full as it was that particular time. Something simple when we talk about maximization, but just credit card receipts. It seems so simple. We all need our plastic these days. But the festival itself, and I know a lot of the other festivals around town here, have not utilized credit card receipts. And that made a major difference this year for people to be able to utilize that. Case in point, there were two actual purchases at our merchandising area that exceeded $150 in merchandise. My guess is that they would not have spent that money if they'd had to pay cash, that the credit card helped out in purchasing those things. Being able to take credit cards at the front door, at the merchandise, at the beer tent, all made a big difference. We did have a broader licensing area. As I mentioned before, we moved the tents further into the park itself. We created a fence-like area there to separate out the licensed area from the non-licensed area that had been approved by the Liquor Commission. And that turned out to be a great addition to the festival itself. Not only for the people who were attending, but the merchants raved about the idea that people could walk around with their beverages and not be locked up in sort of the bullpen area and consume their beverages there and then go out. But be able to walk around, to stay with the families, walk around and visit the different areas made a big difference. We continued our growth in fundraising. We got a lot of new people that joined the festival this year, companies around town and larger ones, but continued growth. And a lot of those particular companies that were in the fundraising and corporate sponsorships actually attended. We ran around and invited all of them. We gave tickets out to the people who did contribute to the fundraising, and they invited their employees there. Many of the employees had never been to the festival before. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the participation in the summer music series and the demonstration downtown, I think that was quite unique. Certainly having the demonstration and captivated a lot of attention and excitement right off the bat for this festival. What does this all mean? Our paid attendance, people through the door that actually paid money to come in, was up 19% over 2011. Over 4,000 people paid to come into the festival this year. Our advance ticket sales were up 19%. That was a good function of our website, of our PayPal, of the credit card capabilities to get advanced ticket sales, as well as just the overall marketing of there. Gate ticket sales was up 13%. So total ticket sales equated up to 15%. And one of the accomplishments that we really set forward was to increase our youth attendance, which was up 12%. So overall, a very, very positive year in terms of the numbers of people that were attracted to the festival and got us up to the levels that we wanted. A point here, I call this like participation equals pride, because I think there's a lot of things that could be said about these particular numbers. The numbers that, when I mentioned before, the paid attendance, that's the people who actually come to join and be a part of the festival, but pay money to get in. There are a lot of people who don't pay. Artists, the athletes, the Highland Games athletes, the musicians, the volunteers. All total, 932 additional people coming into the festival to be a part of this and contribute to that. One particular person on our executive committee took an effort to try to keep track as to the hours of community participation, volunteer participation. And again, it's a nice round number because it's very difficult to get it exact, but I think he swore it was pretty close, that 2,800 hours of volunteer community participation came forward to this particular year's festival. That's a lot of participation and a lot of pride that goes into the festival itself. The actual day of the festival, people providing volunteer efforts, that may be working behind the tables in the beverage tent. It could be helping to help with the wee folks area. It could be in the festival survivor games, many, many different things. But 250 people on the day of the festival were there providing volunteer efforts, a substantial number that is just amazing to me to see that kind of people out there to participate. And again, our significant reduction in effort required by the DPW, second year in a row. We reduced it down both in terms of the number of fences that need to be put up, the amount of effort that the volunteers did. I don't have a quantifiable numbers there for you, but I can assure you that they would be glad to quote them for you to show you the actual effort that DPW was required is down significantly for the second year in a row. Sponsorships. I'm pleased to say that our cash contributions to the Saline Celtic Festival this year was $17,200. In 2011, it was $10,650. That's a pretty good increase. A large portion of that was the corporate sponsorships of Ann Arbor Beverage and Guinness and their parent organization that contributed to having the beverages for the, we still purchased the beverages, but contributed to being an exclusive sponsor of those during that. Another large major contributor in that area was the Wireless Zone of Saline, both in cash and in in-kind contributions. One in-kind contribution that they made that I need to highlight is that they provided a $25 gift certificate to every single one of the 250 volunteers that came forward. So a $25 gift certificate to 250 people that Wireless Zone did, in addition to cash contributions as well. I spoke earlier about the grant from the Michigan Council of the Arts and Cultural Affairs that came in as well. All total, over 25 companies contributing, both in-kind, where there was a substantial increase as well over 2011, and a substantial increase in the cash. But over 25 companies contributing to the sponsorships. In the financials itself, there really is two portions of financials that I need to present. As we started, as I mentioned 2 years ago, we tried to start to wean some of the risk and activities away from the city's requirements and risks that are associated there. We formalized and formed the Friends of the Festival Foundation that allowed them to go out and contribute and gather revenue, both in terms of the liquor license and the sales of alcohol in the festival itself, the sponsorships and the 5K. So that's why there are two portions here. But if I really look at, the idea was that the city portion of the festival is the money coming in from the gate, from the merchants, from the various things that are associated directly with the festival itself. But you see here revenue of just under $60,000. There was a contribution from the Friends of the Festival of over $10,000 with the expenses. Purposely comes out to a net zero, which is we're saying that the city basically broke even on this. Did not cost the city money. In fact, we paid money to the city to offset any overtime that was there. That was paid as an expense item from the Friends of the Festival. So I think that's one of the only one time that there actually is payment made to the city for some of the labor that's done there versus being waived. On the Friends side, again, we had revenue of $38,000, direct expenses, leaving a subtotal of $18,000. Our contribution of the $10,159 contribution back to the city to balance the books with the city, leaving a net, or if you want to call it a profit or what have you, whether you combine them or not, but we ended up with over $8,000 in surplus this year. and that's quite a bit over what we've seen in the past. A real testimony to the work of the people that put forward here, to the sponsorships, to the attendance, to the attention to details on the expense levels, putting things out to bid, keeping the expenses under control, but to show a nut of over $8,000. So that's what 2012 was. So what does 2013 look like? I would say 2012 was a success. In fact, I've been inside of our meetings, and I even said that I think we hit a home run. We had pretty good weather, although it was still hot, but pretty good weather. We had great attendance. We kept expenses under control. We hit a home run. But home runs don't happen every year. Even with good weather, you're not going to always hit a home run. And at what cost? There is a lot of work, guys, that puts on this festival. And there's a lot of volunteers, but there's a handful of people that are doing a large bulk of the work itself. So I say at what cost? It does put a lot of work on. There's a lot of infrastructure. We put up we put those big tents up there. Those tents cost in excess of $15,000. And when you really look at it, we're spending about 10 hours worth of activity in those tents for $15,000. Should we expand it? Should we shrink it? I don't know. I'm not here tonight to show you or tell you what the answers might be. But I think that we do have an obligation of the executive committee to evaluate and recommend. And that's what our intentions are, to come back later and say this is what a good Saline Celtic Festival should continue on. Our goals are still the same, to reduce the risk of the city, to create the dependence on the city itself. But I can't tell you today that the Saline Festival, as it was in 2012, will replicate everything from years on into the future. I think that we have to mesh this in some way with the Main Street. There's a lot of talk and activity, a lot of focus on that, a lot of money being spent by the city on the Main Street activity and other activities. There's other fest, if you would, or street parties, whatever you want to call it. I wouldn't call it a full festival compared to what the Saline Festival does. But you have a summer fest, you have a winter fest, you have an October fest, you have all of these, and they've done a tremendous job. Not to short those by any means. The Oktoberfest this past weekend was wonderful. Saline Fest is always a great, the Summerfest is always a great time. But how does this mesh with something? There's still, in this city, is a dichotomy between the downtown festivals and that one that happens way out there on the outskirts of town. And for one, I would like to see that separation stop in some fashion. I'm not sure whether it's all in talk or if it's in physical togetherness. I think that it's for the city of Saline, and there's a lot of people that come to this city to see that festival and come back to this city, and we need to work together, not apart in those areas. So I think that the obligation of the committee is to evaluate and recommend and come back to you. But at the same time, we also would like to request approval to start thinking about the dates for 2013, July 12th and 13th. We have tried to establish this. As we come back and make our evaluations, we may come back and say we want to move this. But for the time being, we need to go forward. We need to go ahead and take some initiatives. And based on the success and the home run that I think we hit for this year, I would request that we do get approval to move forward with the 2013 festival. In closing, before I take on any questions, I'd like to take advantage of the time. And a couple quick things. First of all, I'd like to wish the mayor a happy birthday. And I'd also like to speak for all of the people in the festival itself, that through the years, and extend a very, very heartfelt thank you to the mayor for all of her efforts through the years. The festival has his ups and downs, but Mayor, you've been there every single year for us, and we really appreciate it. You've been there at the opening ceremonies, you've participated in a lot of the festivities, and you've been there on Sunday morning to help clean up, which is the hardest one of all. So we thank you very much. We wish you the best, and we hope that you'll be here for next year's festival. So thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments?
More of a comment, really, Bob. I just wanted to applaud your efforts and say publicly that, you know, it was an honor to be asked to serve in a capacity this year with the 2012 Celtic Festival. Our opening ceremonies weren't perfect, but I think it went well overall, and there's obviously some room for improvement, but again, it was an honor to be asked, and I especially want to highlight the improved layout, accepting credit cards, and the expanded corporate sponsorships is something that's sort of indicative of the improved Celtic Festival. So again, congratulations, I applaud your efforts, and you're moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Roth?
I'd like to thank you and all the committee's efforts, what they've done, and it's always been a fantastic, heartwarming thing to see how many people volunteer. And the whole thing is restaurant volunteers, and have been on the executive committee for 9 years prior to, in the past. I certainly appreciate everybody's efforts, so I thought we had a perfect storm this time, great weather. But I do, before we jump as far as approval of the request for the dates or more than that, I'd like to see if we could have maybe a work session again so we can iron out some of the bumps before it gets to be too late. And I felt last year that that work session meeting was pushed by the time clock. The calendar kind of defeated some of the worthwhile discussions we had because dates were already set, pressure was put on, and there are some of the figures that you presented here, looking at budget information that I have here. In my mind, it just doesn't quite match up, so I'd like to have further discussions on it. And a goal that I'd like to see is that in the long range, that none of the money goes through the city's actually accounting system, that the festival can stand on its own so the city doesn't hold the liability behind it if things fall short. So with the 501c3, I like that to be the vehicle that allow it to stand on its own feet.
Certainly. That's
I have
our goal.
great support about the festival and so on, but I would like to make the separation as best as possible.
Okay.
Any other questions or Mr. Peters?
I just want to say, even though the festival has streamlined and reduced its dependency on the DPW and what have you, I've heard from many people that go to the festival every year that it was the best festival they've ever seen. So highly commendable that the committee and the festival can continue to streamline itself and compact itself, yet put on a quality show. That people who really know the festival and go there every year, they recognize that was a quality festival. And they really appreciated it.
Good.
Mr. Rhodes?
I would add to that Leslie and I volunteer every year, and we always enjoy it. And this last year was even better than previous years. So hopefully it'll continue on that path.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think actually everybody here in the city really appreciates, I know there's tons of hours that go into this event, so, and it does showcase the city. So appreciate all the hard work. You bring a lot of people from all over the place, and we've done those economic analyses through the CBB about bringing in tourism dollars too. So I think that it brings a lot besides what you just see here in your presentation that maybe a lot of people aren't aware of, but good job. I know Jim's worked really hard on the executive committee, and there's always, you know, people get burned out because they work so hard and they're so passionate about it. So there's always opportunities for new volunteers and expansion and new ideas. And I really like the way you continually reinvent the festival. Everybody that works on it always has great new ideas. So I think I agree that fencing, I know the merchant said that was really beneficial. I talked to a few people down there, and the layout, while it seemed risky, I was really nervous about it personally, and you heard that from me. I think it was really well done, so congratulations.
Good. Thank you.
Please pass that on to the executive committee.
Certainly will. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have the Main Street group. Tim, can you put this up? Can you put this up? Cindy Zupko is going to talk about the Main Street activities, right?
Sure, I'll give
Party
you
you
a
had
quick
last
update
weekend?
because he took a lot. No. And I really wish I would have gone first because that's a really tough act to follow. Congratulations. That was incredible. I'll give you a quick update on the activities of Main Street. One of the first things I can tell you is that we are in the process of finding a new Main Street manager. we decided that instead of going out, since this has been so recent, we did have other candidates that we were interested in. So we're going to look at that avenue first. If that doesn't flush out, then we will go out and post the application again. We just finished Oktoberfest. Rebecca is here too. She's a co-chair along with myself and Helen Martin, and we're both having trouble speaking because it was quite a weekend, and we were blessed with great weather and a lot of wonderful sponsors and volunteers, and it was a successful event too. And next month we'll bring back some dollar figures for you and volunteer numbers as well. But it was wonderful, and it was nice seeing a lot of you up there, so thank you very much. Music Under the Arch, which is under the umbrella of Saline Main Street, also had a fundraiser last night. That was extremely successful as well. I think they raised, or at least the proceeds were close to $5,000, which will help us put on the winter music series from January through May. So we were really excited about that. So 2 successful events in one weekend. We're kind of riding high right now, so we're pretty happy about that. Our next step is we're working on Winterfest. We have a committee that's working on that. And the baseline assessment that we did back in, I think, May, we received the report from the National Main Street Center, and we hope to, in the future, very, very soon future, give a report on the results of that baseline assessment. So we would like to do it here at City Council, and then again, we're probably going to do a town meeting style type of update downtown with all of our business and property owners, and we'll open up to the public. From the baseline assessment, we have created objectives for each of our teams, which is organization, design, promotion, and economic restructuring, economic development. So we are working on our work plans, which next Tuesday is our board meeting, where we'll be reviewing all of those work plans. There are about 40 work plans that we're working on that fall under each of those categories. So next month, I will be coming back and discussing all of those activities, and they'll be posted on the website and also shared with the community. I think that's all I wanted. I didn't want to go through in all of that because I think it would take up too much time. But we'll get a date on the calendar for the community, the baseline assessment, so that we can bring everybody up to date on that, and then discuss each individual work plan. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thanks. So as I mentioned, we wanted to switch out the police recognition because we really appreciate all the officers being here, and it's really important that you get recognized, but we didn't want you to have to wait till the end of the meeting, so my apologies for switching around. And we didn't plan on doing that at first, so we had need a little time for the refreshments, otherwise we would have done it right off. Chief Hernick, you have a microphone here? You can't walk around with that. This might be helpful. Just do it's a lot easier. You just don't want to walk around.
Working?
Yep. Just don't get too close to that other one.
This is always odd because you have your back to somebody and your back to the other, so I apologize that I'll be kind of flipping back and forth. First of all, I want to thank the mayor and the city council for allowing me this opportunity to present police awards to our police officers. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you all about the incident first, and then what I will do is I'll have the officers come up. During my interview as police chief, I was asked a question about what I liked about being a police chief, and I remember answering everything. And it's a highlight of my job tonight to have the opportunity to give out awards to those officers and staff that go above and beyond and who've performed exemplary service. I'd also like to acknowledge a couple of people who are in the audience tonight. Director of Public Safety, Matthew Harshberger, Deputy Chief Gordy Schick, and Lieutenant Brandon Williams from Pittsfield Township. On the morning of September 13th, 2012, Saline dispatcher Sandra Wood and Terry Seams received a 911 call from a frantic mother reporting her 15-year-old son had just run out of the home extremely agitated, carrying a large kitchen knife. Actually, it looked more like a butcher knife. He left towards Wilderness Park. Officers from the Saline Police Department were dispatched to the area. Sergeant Jay Basso made contact with the suspect in the wooded area in the park. The suspect was still carrying the knife and began yelling at Sergeant Basso to shoot him. Sergeant Basso ordered him to drop the knife, but he refused and kept screaming for Sergeant Basso to shoot him. Sergeant Basso repeatedly tried to get him to drop the knife, however, he refused. At that time, Officer Gruschow and Officer Ringe arrived and joined Sergeant Basso. The juvenile even became more agitated and began to make motions as if he was going to charge the officers, but instead ran into the woods. The officers lost sight of the subject, and Sergeant Basso requested additional units from Pittsfield Township and requested a K-9 unit from MSP to search the woods. A perimeter was established around the area with officers on foot, officers on checkpoints, and officers on mobile patrol. Dispatch requested if Pleasant Ridge Elementary School should be locked down, and in turn, the elementary school was locked down. Sergeant Basso was able to command all aspects of this incident while still performing a search for the subject, which is no easy task. About 45 minutes later, initial contact, the officers received information that the subject was in a cornfield east of Wood Hill Drive. Officer Gruschow was in the area and spotted the subject walking along the field. The subject walked out of the field between the houses, still carrying the butcher knife and continuing to scream at the officer to shoot him. Officer Ringe arrived from the south, as did Officer Small from Pittsfield Township. Both officers ordered the subject to drop the knife. The subject refused and turned north towards Officer Gruschow. Officer Gruschow many times ordered the subject to drop the knife and came very close to shooting the subject and continued as he continued to come towards Officer Gruschow. The subject kept taunting officers the whole time to shoot him. A request was made for anyone with a taser to respond, and Pittsfield Township Officer De La Pina was close and responded. As Officer De La Pina approached the subject turned towards him and taunted him to shoot him. Officer De La Pina was able to get close enough, and after warning the subject, deployed the taser. The subject immediately fell to the ground. He was restrained and taken into custody. The use of the taser ended this incident without anyone being shot, stabbed, cut, or injured. The suspect was transported to the University of Michigan Hospital for a mental evaluation. Warrants were sought, and the department received 2 felony warrants for the subject, carrying a dangerous weapon with unlawful intent, and assaulting and resisting and obstructing police. The incident is a true picture of how teamwork and cooperation work so well. Dispatcher Woods and Seams did an outstanding job keeping officers informed and relaying information and coordinating from the department. Sergeant Basso, Officer Gruschow, Officer Ringe, Officer Small, and Officer De La Pina each had every legal right to use deadly force to stop this suspect. However, each and every one of these officers used great restraint, even though they were approached and taunted by an obviously agitated subject carrying a large butcher knife. What I would like is if the council would come down here at this point in time. Please step up here. And what I would like to do is I would like to call the recipients forward. As a result of their actions, they're being commended. Dispatcher Sandra Wood and Terry Seams are receiving a letter of commendation. So if you'd please step forward. And if I could have Officer Tiffany Small and Officer Mark De La Pina, who are receiving a certificate of merit. And I'd like Sergeant James Basso, Officer David Ringe, and Officer Dennis Grushel, who are going to be receiving the department citation, which is the highest award that the department can give. And in addition to their award, the officers will be receiving a blue, white, blue ribbon to wear on their uniform as a commemorative of their actions. I believe that Sergeant Basso has a couple of words that he would like to say tonight as well.
Thanks, Chief. This is a true picture of the effort and the collaboration between Pittsfield Township and Saline Police Department working together. People don't see what happens behind the scenes between the two departments with joint training that people don't realize. With Chief Rennick coming on board, he started this merit awards policy. He continued it from Chief Lindman, who was before him. This is the first time this department has ever had a merit awards program. I'd like to thank Chief for bringing this to fruition. We were very fortunate because of the possibility of deadly force. Like the Chief had said, any one of us could have shot and killed this 15-year-old kid. Whether it be for lack of equipment or however it may play out, I hope that the council takes everything into consideration on how fortunate we are today that we weren't faced with something more serious. So I hope the council takes that into consideration and steps forward to continue what we do and give us the tools to continue what we do. So thank you very much.
I'd like to ask the City Council if you would be willing to recess your meeting. My wife, who I want to thank, Barb, here tonight, made cookies, and we have refreshments for everybody in the audience. Thank you.
We'll take a 15-minute break and have refreshments, have an opportunity to talk and thank our officers and the staff, and we'll start the meeting again at 8:20. Okay? Thank you. Okay, on to the agenda. Under citizen comments on agenda items under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on items that appear on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Hello, Mary Hess, 600 Canterbury. I'm talking regarding the Saline Main Street downtown alley project. And reading the lease, I am concerned as far as the Caesar's Pizza that is on the other side of this alley. There is a door that comes out into the alley. And I don't know if the realtor or the owners of that building have been notified that there are 2 adjacent property owners that are probably going to be closing that. Because that could be, that is their delivery system for the back part of the pizza. On the other side of the alley are stairs. So that in fact is an area that is for everyone. And I really think that that is something that should be addressed before the city puts itself into a position of maybe we have prohibited someone to use their business to the best and highest advantage. I also, as far as the $10,000, Tifa always gets hit for something, and it still is taxpayers' money. And I'm wondering what happens with the cost overruns. I agree with the gentleman prior as far as we have a lot of festivals. and we have movies in the park, and we have concerts in the park that everybody can go. But I think with the economics, and we have to pick and choose. And we, being the taxpayers, that we ask you if there's only so much money in that pie, that, you know, we look at that area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Bob Rash. I'm speaking now as the co-owner of Max Acadian. I'm not here speaking toward the alley project as well. Not speaking necessarily as concerned with the Main Street in the city, partnering with the other two restaurants opposite us, but more concerned with the fact that this is moving forward at a pace that seems to not have taken into consider the Liquor Commission rules and regulations, the ADA considerations of that alleyway in terms of how it will be designed, and getting layouts and approvals on that before lease agreements are created. It took 3 years almost for this council to bring to completion the ADA concerns and requirements for the sidewalk seating up there, and I would hate for us to have to go through that same kind of thing with the ADA now, with that alleyway, as well as certain liquor commission concerns for the blocking off of closed-in areas for the proper management of those areas, so that being right on the street there, that alcohol beverages do not get consumed into the parking lot or out on the street, and the Liquor Commission rules are followed appropriately. So I think that those layouts and those approvals should take precedent over some of the other approvals.
Thank you.
Glenn Law, 521 Canterbury Drive. Following up on the same issue with the Saline Main Street project, I think with all the things that have been already said, I would hope the council is taking and would take the actions necessary to make sure that all those requirements were met. I think on the surface, and I think overall, it's a great idea and a great venture to have businesses and restaurants, and especially the downtown and also other areas, but downtown, since we're specifically talking about that, that they have the opportunity to also attract customers. And it's the way it is that downtowns are now, that they have to be more vibrant and try to find ways to become more vibrant, and this is just one way of doing that. Certainly, council proceeds cautiously, but I think overall it is a great move and partnership, and I'd like to see it going forward. Quickly on the police, again, I echo those that the mayor suggested, that it's a great teamwork of Pittsfield and Saline to work together, and they are the cream of the crop for sure. Thank you.
Any further public comment? Now we'll move on to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. We do have a change on agenda item, well, it's on the agenda as 12-143. It actually should be 12-150, C-12-150. So if everybody could change that on their agenda. Do we have a motion to approve and adopt the items on the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Move Rhodes, second Peters. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Under unfinished business, item 1259, this is ordinance number 738. This is an ordinance to amend the City of Saline zoning ordinance to provide for and regulate home-based business districts. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 19, 2012 memo from Saline City Planning Commission, and second reading of ordinance number 738, an ordinance to amend the City of Saline zoning ordinance to provide for and regulate home-based business districts. This would be a motion to approve and adopt or not adopt said ordinance number 738 as submitted.
Move to approve and adopt.
Move Morrow. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second Terhar. I know that both Mr. Rubel and Mr. Luan are here to address any questions, or I don't know if you want to do a little presentation about how we got back to this place again. Maybe that would be helpful.
Doug Lewan, Carlisle Wortman Associates, for those who might be watching at home or those in the audience. We're looking at the home-based business regulations. We had talked about this to City Council some time ago, as well as the Planning Commission. And the last time this was brought up, there were several questions about particularly the what we call Tier 2 home occupations. And those are home occupations that you could carry on within an accessory structure on your property and actually have an employee. And so this kind of home occupation is really set up to allow some additional economic opportunity for certain folks within the city that might have a business that they're operating out of their home. The questions that we tried to address from the last time this came up were, there was some question, especially in particular locations of the city, with regard to the Tier 2 business, and these were concerns with regard to the intensity of the business, is if, how this might affect our historic districts, and if the Historic District Commission could be notified. Based on those comments, we added, if you maybe noticed in the ordinance that you received, we added a number 5 under the A5, and it's a notice of Planning Commission hearing provided to the Historic District Commission. So all Tier 2 home occupations require a public hearing, so these aren't something that can be administratively approved, has to go to the Planning Commission as a special land use, and that hearing notice would be sent to the Historic District Commission just so they could come to the hearing and voice their concerns if there were any. The other thing that received some discussion at the last time this was discussed was the location. And there was concerns that we would be allowing the Tier 2 home occupations, anywhere within the city, perhaps in subdivisions, and that wasn't the case and wasn't the intent. The home occupation Tier 2 were only permitted in certain locations within the city, particularly and we clarified this a little bit just so there was no discussion about it. They must be located on a collector or arterial road as defined in the thoroughfare plan of the city master plan. So in the city master plan, there's a map that shows these various levels of roads. Those are really the main roads within the city. They're not interior subdivision streets. Whenever I do an ordinance like this, I try to tie it as much as I can to the master plan, so we actually have some cross back and forth, and that's what we did. And just so for your information, those roads are Michigan Avenue, of course, North and South Ann Arbor Road, Monroe Street, Austin Street, Waterworks, Woodland, East, Maple, Industrial Drive, Bemis, Old Creek, Bennett Street, and Willis. And it's not all of those roads. The National Functional Classification has half on one side of the street and half on the other. But those are just those are the kinds of roads that are permitted. They wouldn't be allowed in any of the interior streets. And even on these roads, just to be clear, this is still a special land use, so they have to go in front of the Planning Commission, the public hearing. It's a subjective approval, and if there were issues or problems, it could be denied if it was in the wrong location based on impacts to the neighbors. A couple other minor things that were changed. We clarified that home businesses could be located also in the D1 and the D2 zoning districts. That's the new downtown overlay district that we're still working on at the Planning Commission. Hopefully you'll have that in front of you next month. And then there was a question about when we have any of these kind of Tier 2 home businesses, we wanted to make sure that people weren't coming to those businesses to buy things. It's really not opening up retail stores here. And so we wanted to prohibit advertising those kind of businesses so people can't find them in the yellow pages or on the internet or whatever. But Mr. Rhodes indicated that there might be some conflict with state law when it comes to trade license requirements. And so we're still trying to prohibit most Tier 2 home occupations from advertising, so people don't come to their home, which would really disrupt a neighborhood. But we added except where in conflict with state law. So I think that covers the trade license people that might be working out of their homes. And then there was another clarification at the very end of the ordinance about personal property tax. Someone had to, if they had not paid their personal property tax or claimed their personal property tax, they would not be given a Tier 2 home occupation license. And we just changed that to a property tax because of the personal property tax situation. So those are the situations. If I remember correctly, the main concern was the location, and hope I've clarified that. The Planning Commission was at the last meeting. Of the Planning Commission were comfortable with these changes as presented.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Mr. Luan? Mr. Gearbox.
Just a couple clarifications. You had mentioned subject to the objections of neighbors when you were talking about it, when this comes through the permit process, whatever. Does not guarantee that the Planning Commission could go ahead and proceed to grant, with the council's permission, the application, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just because of special land use, it does give the Planning Commission the ability to review the use based on potential negative effects to the neighbors. But I always tell people when they ask me, it's not a vote of the people, it's a vote of the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council. But we do, when we do get public comments, specifically if it's something we hadn't considered before, those are very helpful and in many cases do sway the Planning Commission.
And then one other scenario that I have, because we're going to consider Ordinance 745, we're going to change about the administrative review process. Here's an example. Someone gets authorization to have a Tier 2 business, and they're putting it in their garage at this point. A year, 6 months from now, they realize, oh no, I need a larger structure. I want a 1,000-foot structure that we would allow an additional auxiliary building. Would that come back for a permit review, or is it going to be an administrative review authorization?
Administrative review would not cover special land use because this would be an increased intensity of the special land use. They'd have to come back with a new public hearing back in front of the Planning Commission. So administrative review would not cover the situation that you're talking about.
So anytime that occurs, it would have to come through. So if anyone wanted to add a building or whatever, that would occur. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
for
you.
any special land use, bigger building, more land use, they've got to come back.
Okay.
This would be no exception.
Thank you.
Mr. Rhodes.
Question perhaps for Mr. Campbell, and that is, when will the fees for these different things come to council for approval? Because we need to do that before the ordinance takes effect, I believe.
As far as we have our annual fee book coming up, we typically do that in the winter, but that would be a question that I would have for Mr. Rubel, when it's scheduled to have those changes.
We did discuss proposed fees at the work meeting, I believe, and then with the Planning Commission. And if the City Council approves the adoption of the ordinance, it takes a certain number of days before it goes into effect. It doesn't go into effect until 10 days after publication in a newspaper, and we can bring the proposed fees back to the next council meeting because they aren't in the action tonight. Tonight's just the adoption of the ordinance.
So the effectiveness of this ordinance will be on hold until those fees get approved by council? Correct?
They could be, yes.
I mean, it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Morrow, did you have a comment?
I have a comment, not a question, if that's okay, Mayor. As the council representative to the Planning Commission, I feel compelled to speak a little bit about this ordinance. Obviously, as the mover, I'm pretty enthusiastic about it, and I should first start by thanking Mr. Luan and Mr. Rubel for the work that they invested in drafting this ordinance, but also, as the council rep to Planning Commission, you all need to know that the Planning Commission did work long and hard on this issue.
I think this is an important step for the city of Saline. I think it embraces a trend which is becoming all the more common in our state economy, but also in our local economy. But in addition to that, I think there's enough safeguards in place to prevent activities and enterprises that undermine the quality of life in certain areas of the city. So again, as the mover, I'm very enthusiastic about this. I urge its adoption. And finally, I want to, thank the mayor because as many of you know, and those in the audience this evening are probably well aware, there was a point where this issue was kind of dead. And so, Mayor, I appreciate your persistence because I do think it's an important issue and it's appreciated. Thank you.
You're welcome. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item under new business, 12145 Saline Main Street Downtown Alley Project. At the lease agreements, we need a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 27, 2012 memo from City Manager Campbell and the September 26, 2012 letter from Saline Main Street.
So moved.
Move Marl, do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Kirby. Mr. Campbell, do you want to go through where we are on this and possibly touch on some of the questions that were asked?
Sure, Mayor, thank you very much. The alley project, and of course we have Cindy Chubko, president of Saline Main Street, as well as Rebecca Schneider, the chair of the design team of Saline Main Street that has been spearheading this project, talking about placemaking, and so the design team said this is a good project to move forward. And also, Councilmember Rhodes is also part of the design team too, so I would, any of those that would like to address the council, certainly welcome to do that. But the alleyway, the idea of making that a place, and that's been under discussion for the last few years, if not more, to try to make it more user-friendly, be able to use it for different events, and make some improvements on it and that type of thing. And so as the city contracts with Saline Main Street to help promote the downtown and do projects, do events, those types of things to help promote our downtown, this is certainly a project that the design team is logical for them to take on. And I don't want to steal too much thunder, so Rebecca, if you would like to address the council as well, and because I've not been a part of the design team meetings, but essentially in concept, it would require a couple different moving pieces. One is the overall piece agreement between the city and Saline Main Street to make various improvements, some sort of an entryway, some overhead lights between the two buildings, a wrought iron fence, some pumping up of a couple sunken concrete flags and the like. And then the other components of that are individual leases between the city and Brecken Grill and the city and Mangiamo to lease that space immediately adjacent to the backs of their buildings, where they would have outdoor seating, and but they would also they also have what I would call a laundry list of items that they would be doing to make improvements to their backs of their own buildings with their own money, which I think is very important as part of this project, because they need to have, as they say, some skin in the game. And so I think that's very important. But there's also in the lease agreements requires up to 6 public events during the 12-month cycle that they would have to allow for public events, so allow the public to be in that area, for whether it be for current festivals or new events, whatever that might be. I think that in a nutshell is the basics of the 3 moving components. As far as the, I don't know if Rebecca, if you want to speak to a couple of the concerns that were brought up earlier, reference to the ADA compliance issues, if that had been looked at, and also as far as the liquor control. I mean, as far as liabilities from the city's perspective, they would be required to provide insurances and name us as additional insured for both their liquor liability and their general liability, those types of things. And of course, they would have to, before they would be able to do anything back there, they would have to have liquor control approval.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Schneider. I'm the chair of the design team for Saline Main Street. And we've been moving ahead with this alley project as City Manager Campbell pointed out, this is something we've been talking about for quite some time. It's a way to create more community space in our downtown. And one of the wonderful things about this space is it doesn't require anyone to close a parking lot or a street, which disrupts the commerce and just general business going on in our downtown. So it is a nice way to create another wonderful gathering space, to have some small events. Some of the things we've talked about would be wine tastings. You could have sort of some dynamic art gallery displays going on downtown. I know that Cindy had given me some examples of other alleyway projects in other towns, and they've done Alley Cat Adoption Day, where the Humane Society's coming in on a pet adoption in that space as well. And those are sort of the goals that we're moving ahead with. Our alley isn't that dilapidated. We're fortunate. It just requires a few tweaks, we think, to make it more user-friendly and just a great and better space in our downtown. Councilman Rhodes has been spearheading this effort and has taken on a lion's share of the work involved in it, and I really want to thank him because he's kept this ball moving when there's been a lot of other balls in the air. So thank you, David. David, I didn't know if you had a chance to talk with, I know you'd talked with the property owner at Little Caesars a little bit, so I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to address with that concern.
Yeah, I think that I could address some of the comments that were made earlier. The lady who owns 100 South Ann Arbor Street was talked to very early on before we even really got started, and has given approval for the use of the alley space and for the attachment of the overhead lights to her building. The space, which is under consideration for lease, would stop before the side passage door to that 100 South Ann Arbor Street building, so it would not interfere with loading in or out of that space. Both owners of the restaurants have contacted Michigan Liquor Control Commission to obtain preliminary approval to utilize that space within the rules established by that commission. What else? Oh, and ADA, the alley is presently grade level, has access, so that should not be an issue, although it was not something that I specifically looked at in talking with people.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
I think that covered it all.
Why don't we open up for a little bit of discussion? Does any council members have any? Can you stay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Peters.
Question. So you have contact and have discussion with Bagels and Whiskers and with Caesars empty now. That's all 100. That's all same owner.
Yes, it is.
Is Benny's involved with this at all? Benny's has nothing to?
No.
No, they're farther down the
right.
alleyway, so they're not going to be impacted.
Were those staircases, I too noticed that one door, but on the other side, there's two staircases go upstairs. Are there residents up there? Is there anybody living upstairs that would be?
Not that I'm aware of.
affected by this?
It's
No? Okay. There is a fire pump connection back there, as long as I guess they can still get to that pump connection, so I'm back in Mangiamo's
Right.
for proper sprinkler system. The two leases are different. Is that because the two, I'm not sure why two leases are so different. One's a little longer than the other.
I have not had the opportunity to review the leases for Mangiamo or Brecken Grill.
That would be an administrative question. Let's just see if there's any more design questions. Mr. Peters, I'll see. Is there anybody else that have more questions for Rebecca? Mr. Gearbox?
Well, actually, discussion, yeah, I just want to, is it in written, do you have a written document or anything with the owner of 100 understanding what this is going to mean by, is there any of that
I don't.
understanding something? Because all this type of thing happens when we get clarifications and then we don't have an understanding and then we get property owners going back and forth. I just want to make sure we have a little more understanding.
I did not pursue an agreement in writing with the owner of 100 South Ann Arbor, but that can certainly be done.
Because my concern is just that issue of safety, and if they should have repairs on their building or something, when we have at least that they can't get access to do the repairs and things to the building. Understanding, being on a city alley, representing a building that way, I have the similar concern. So just to make sure that we're having all property owners surrounding it are all in agreement, and if she doesn't want to participate in the seating or whatever, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure everybody's participating in this clearly.
Okay, we can pursue that.
With this particular understanding, I'd like you to consider the scenario that another food business may move in that particular spot. Are you going to exclude them for the use and access of the alley, which they probably should have a portion of, and not be considered to be, hold a contract or a lease agreement?
No, access to that space is not part of this lease area. So, but they would not have access to it because the space would in fact be leased to someone else.
Well, I was just wondering if we intentionally want to exclude that property owner from never having a lease. And that we're going to have a letter of understanding that probably should be considered a letter of understanding.
It's not
Definitely defined in it.
There is a term on the lease, so this isn't in perpetuity.
One-year leases.
Okay.
And I would just add that this is, we have leased other, I mean, we have done it in negotiations in other areas, and, you know, if there are issues that, for me personally, I understand that some of the concerns some of the council has, but it is a one-year lease. There are items to be worked through, but at the same time, we can't work through those items till we move forward with some of these pieces. So it's sort of a phase thing, and this is the first part of the phase. So it isn't a perpetuity lease. Just want to clarify that. So.
Mayor, one other thing.
I'm sorry.
Has this gone before Tifa yet for approval? How are we going to handle the budget being reallocated to this, or is this part of the $10,000 that the?
I think it's in the budget. I believe it was in the budget.
That's correct. It was in TIFA, and it was transferred out to general fund. So that's why the proposed agreement between Main Street and the city.
But I thought that was tied with the grant if we got it, so we don't have to worry about that at this point?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Peters.
In reference to Mr. Etch's question about the liquor license, correct me if I'm wrong, you folks know more about this than I do. Both Mangiamo's and Brecken currently serve outdoors. So would they be covered? Would their licenses be up to date for this? Or does it take a different license?
Do you want to answer that, David?
They have both indicated that they would go back to Michigan Liquor Control Commission for an expansion of their authorized space. Yeah.
Okay, is there any questions, more questions for Rebecca? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And then, Mr. Peters, you had a question for Mr. Campbell regarding the leases, is that correct?
Just the to-do lists were different on the leases. And we have landscaping costs to Main Street, and we also have landscaping costs to Mangiamo's, but nothing to Brecken. I just wonder why those were.
Mr. Campbell?
There was, I'm talking about.
Yes, right. But, and again, I will turn that over to Mr. Rhodes because he has been, my simple answer is, these are the lists that were agreed upon by Brecken Grill and by Mangiamo to make the improvements to the backs of their buildings. And what Mr. Peters is alluding to is that the amount of improvements for Mangiamo is longer and with a larger cost as the one proposed by Brecken. So
and the primary reason for that is that the Mangiamo space is longer, and they have some plantable space next to their building, whereas Brecken Grill does not.
Okay, so Brecken can only go back that 20 feet or so that they.
Right.
Okay.
The leases are just for the spaces directly behind those restaurants,
It's about 90
and not any
feet, isn't
further.
it? It's about 90 feet back to that curb where the ramp goes down to the back door?
Not that area.
Not that area, it
No.
stops before that.
It stops before that. It actually stops before the side door from 100 South Ann Arbor Street.
Okay.
So it's from the South Ann Arbor edge of the building that Brecken Grill occupies to just prior to that door on the side of
It's
South Ann
across from
Arbor
that
Street.
stone half wall back there. Okay.
We did not want to interfere with either the Tuxedo Place or our Benny's Bakery.
Are there, right now, we're on the motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Mr. Campbell and the Saline Main Street Group. Is there any other questions regarding acknowledging receipt or questions regarding these memos and the leases? Mr. Campbell?
thank you, Madam Mayor. You may certainly, if it's a concern of council, you could certainly add a requirement that they receive liquor control approval before as a stipulation in this agreement. if there is a concern.
Ms. Hill?
I believe that they have to apply for additional outdoor seating, and it will come back before this body for approval.
Right.
It's required.
So I'm just saying that would strengthen that and hopefully make the council more comfortable that they do have to follow those rules as opposed to just saying it's done and not providing proof.
Further discussion on the motion to acknowledge receipt. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item A is a motion to approve or not approve the lease agreement between the City of Saline and Mangiamo Italian Grill for use of the alley immediately adjacent to their business for outdoor seating. To authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to execute said agreement.
Well, I was kind of holding back since I've been so involved with this, but I will move to...
I'll go ahead if you want to.
I will move to approve and authorize.
I'd be happy to second.
Move Rhodes, second Morrow. Discussion. Mr. Gearby.
Because you've discussed the concerns that I've been voicing, and I think as long as the other property owners are aware of it and everything, that they're all tied in there, understand what's going on, and because this lease is only until March 1st, 2014, I think any time period that should change at that point, if a business goes in there, whatever, then we can renegotiate and figure out how they can resolve that problem at that point in time. So I think for this point, I'm okay with this to go forward.
Any further discussion on this motion? This is the Mangiamo lease, right? Everybody got that? So we have a motion to approve and authorize? No discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item B, this would be a motion to approve or not approve the lease agreement between the City of Saline and Brecken Grill for use of the alley immediately adjacent to their business for outdoor seating. To authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to execute said agreement.
Move to approve and authorize.
Second.
Move Gearbox, second Morrow, to approve and authorize. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item C, this is a motion to approve or not approve the lease agreement between the City of Saline and Saline Historic Downtown Alliance for implementation of the improvements to the alley between the south side of 101, 103, 105, and 107 West Michigan Avenue and the north side of 100 South Ann Arbor Street. To authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to execute said agreement.
Move to approve and authorize.
Move to Har.
Second.
Second Peters. Discussion. Well, I'd just like to say that I'm absolutely delighted to be moving to this next step because we've been talking for years about making more places to loiter, and this would be one. So someday you're going to put signs up that say, please loiter too, okay? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 12, 146, refunding bonds, 2004 unlimited tax general obligation bonds. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 26, 2012 letters and resolution from Clark Hill regarding proposed issuance of 2012 refunding bonds and resolution to authorize issuance of 2012 refunding bonds or general obligation unlimited tax. And the September 27, 2012 letter from Stoddard, Barch, and Associates Incorporated regarding financial advisor services for bond projects. To authorize or not authorize the engagement of Stoddard, Barch, and Associates Incorporated and Clark Hill for their professional services for the 2012 refunding bonds. To approve and adopt or not adopt the resolution to authorize issuance of the 2012 refunding bonds with a general obligation unlimited tax as submitted.
Move to authorize and to approve and adopt.
Second.
Move Gearba, second to Har. Would you like to come up, Paul, and sort of explain why we're doing this? Who would be best? Mr. Campbell, you want to do it?
Well, I'll introduce them real quick. But first, just you may recall City Council had a work session at the last meeting, prior to the last meeting, I should say, to talk about this. Paul Stoddard from Stoddard and Barch, who served the City of Saline as its financial advisor for a number of years, served us well. Notified us that this could be a possibility of refunding one of the street bonds, the 2004 issue, which was the second of two issues. One was in 2000, this one was in 2000, this one 2004. I'm not going to get into all the details. That's what these guys do. But we also have, we have Paul Stoddard from Stoddard Barch, as I said, our financial advisor. We also have our bond counsel, Roger Schwetz from Clark Hill, and you have the information. So this would be an opportunity to have a refunding and have a savings on that 2004 street debt that was issued, and I will turn it over to one or both of the gentlemen that would like to address the council.
I'm Roger Sweats from Clark Hill. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. You have in front of you the resolution that provides you with the legal framework to move forward with the refinancing of these 2004 bonds. With the numbers that have previously been presented to you by Stouter Barch, we constructed this resolution based on some recommended parameters that Paul had provided to us. Interest rates are very low right now and the bond market's very dynamic, so this does approve the issuance of the bonds within a certain range of parameters and name some authorized officers to go forward and complete this transaction so that we can move quickly and respond to market conditions as we move forward in the next time period here. I do want to emphasize that this can only be done if there's at least 3% net savings to the city. What that means is that all of the costs of issuing these bonds are paid out of the bonds, and the savings that are represented to you are net savings after those costs have been paid out of the bonds. There's no impact to this from the budget of the city if the bonds are not issued. The costs are not incurred. And then finally, did want to mention that there are a couple of different sales approaches that Paul's been considering because of some of the dynamics in the market. And so we did want to preserve a lot of flexibility in this resolution. And so it does preserve the flexibility either to go out with a noticed public sale of the bond issue or to seek a private placement of the bonds with a banking institution should that opportunity present itself to achieve the savings that are available here in a quick and efficient manner. Those typically have a cheaper cost of issuance, but it does require some interest in the banking market, which we are seeing these days. But again, Paul wanted some flexibility to identify specifics on this issue and allow the city to react quickly. With that, I don't know if you have anything else, Paul, you want to add?
Really, just a quick summary. The bonds are callable still about another year and a half out, which is really why this hasn't come before you sooner. Rates have been low for quite some time now. But as we get closer to the date on which we can take the old bonds off the market, the savings improve with the passage of time. The bonds we're talking about have an interest rate on them right now at about 4 1/3%. Current market rates for the same period of time are running closer to 2%. So that's what we're hoping to be able to achieve. We're looking at a couple different options. Bank placement will allow us to go in with a little bit lower upfront cost, which may improve the savings. If not, we would run the conventional route where a credit rating would be requested and received, and we would make an offering of the bonds to the broader market. So that's where we're at. I think it's going to take a month to a month and a half probably to get it done, and we're just hoping that rates behave in the meantime. Happy to answer any questions. Oh, the savings we're looking at is maybe $200,000 to $250,000, $20,000 to $25,000 a year, and that largely is related to the taxes that the city collects from property owners. So much of the savings we would expect would be driven back to them.
Questions from council? Mr. Har.
Yes, thank you. I just had a question about, are there any greater or lesser risks to the city in leaving open the different avenues of refinancing the bonds, banks versus the more conventional route? Or
Well,
any side effects?
No, and actually sometimes private arrangements with banks can be better because sometimes the terms that they put on the transactions are a little more advantageous. They're less concerned about those terms. But either way you go, I mean, our drive is to get the best transaction and the greatest amount of savings. So whichever one produces that result is the way that we would recommend the transaction proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We did have a work session. A lot of the questions were asked then. So there's no further discussion. We have a motion to authorize and approve and adopt. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 12, 147, this is a request to waive tax penalty and interest at 565 Ironwood Way. This would be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 19, 2012 memo from City Treasurer Bennett and the September 10, 2012 letter from Joe Marcos Matos requesting waiver of the tax penalty interest on his property at 565 Ironwood Way.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Second.
Move Gearba, second Morrow. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And this would be a motion to approve or deny the request to waive the tax penalty and interest for the summer tax bill at 565 Ironwood Way in the amount of $175.40.
Just say, I move to deny.
Move Roth. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 12-148, ordinance number 745, an ordinance to amend the City of Saline zoning ordinance, section 8.02, to provide for administrative review of small site changes and additions. This would be a motion to acknowledge receipt of September 19, 2012 memo from the Saline City Planning Commission and reading of ordinance number 745, an ordinance to amend the City of Saline zoning ordinance, section 8.02, to provide for administrative review of small site changes and additions, to approve and adopt or not adopt said ordinance number 745 as submitted.
Move to approve and adopt.
I'll second.
Rhodes, second Peters. Does anybody have any questions? Does Mr. Lewan or Mr. Rubel need to come up for this discussion? Mr. Gearba, I know you had some concerns. I think the clarification around the special
Clarification was
use.
more the special use permit.
Right,
So
okay.
if that.
So we
takes
have a
priority.
motion on the floor to approve and adopt with no discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. On last on the agenda is 12-149 Risden Park Project. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the September 19, 2012 memo from Parks and Recreation Director Scruggs to authorize or not authorize Simon and Rasinski to proceed with the proposed Risden Park Improvement Project as presented. You must be Simon.
Yep.
Great.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I have had this plan to improve Risden Park for actually a couple of years. I think it was the summer I was going into 7th grade, where me and my mom, who bike around Saline a lot, we figured out that this was actually a park. We thought it was a someone's backyard for many years. And on finding out there's actually a park, I kind of got to thinking, you know, maybe I could try to fix this place up. And my original motive was actually to get some volunteer hours to get into NHS. But actually, now that I'm in NHS, I decided to try again with the project because the first couple of times I got rejected. And I figured I could run the project through NHS, and that would be my workforce, that I could allow kids in NHS to get volunteer hours helping out with the park. And so basically the plan, it's behind you. It's kind of hard to see. But I'm looking to create kind of a natural boundary along the sides, most likely out of evergreen shrubs with some clumps of 3 bushes on the end. And then we're going to have hopefully 2 decorative trees in the middle of the park. I know there was a concern earlier. I was talking to somebody about the sanitary sewer that runs diagonal across the park. We've actually met with the parks foreman on this, and we don't believe it'll be a problem. And the trees, as they won't be growing into like massive trees, they'll just be decorative. I don't believe that the root system will cause any problem to that sewer. And also, I was planning on getting a sign for the park to actually establish it as a park. There's currently no sign there, and that kind of adds to the perception that it's somebody's backyard. And I was planning on having a small flower bed around the sign, and I know that the picnic table and the bench are already there. The funding for this project would come from various fundraisers and stuff that I would put together through NHS. I was thinking probably a can drive, possibly a car wash, and I know there's a couple of other ideas that I could float around. And on top of that, I've also been around to 3 local garden centers, and they've all expressed interest in helping to donate or give me discounts on prices of garden supplies that we'll need to fix up the park. And so I also plan on bridging the financial gap that way as well.
Great. Have you talked to the next door neighbor?
I have not. I was going to wait until I got complete approval to talk to them about this project.
Okay, Mr. Rhodes.
Is Pleasant Ridge along the bottom of this drawing?
Actually, it's kind of flipped
what am I
around.
looking
Pleasant
at?
Ridge is along the top, yes, yes.
And this is or southern.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
so
kind of
the-
upside
the
down.
Shrubbery is planted on the interior edges of the park?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And that would be the sign, the diagonal up there?
Yep.
Okay. That'd be nice to see something done with that little park space.
Yeah.
Question, we actually don't have a motion on the floor. Do we want a motion?
I'll move it to authorize.
Move
Second.
Gearba, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second Peters. Okay, discussion?
I just want to say, I think this is an outstanding example of citizen involvement. For a long time, I thought that Rooston Park needs a little something, because if you go by there, it's hard to tell the border between Rooston Park and the neighbors, and you feel like you're sitting in somebody's yard. So I want to commend you on this. It's a great idea.
Thank you.
And if we can help you in any way, let us know.
Mr. Gearba, did you have?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this will enhance it quite well, because I drive by it every day, too, so
Mhm.
living on that
Yeah.
street, I think it'll look very nice, and I really appreciate your taking the initiative
Thank
to
you.
do this.
And Mr. Rhodes?
Question for Mr. Campbell. Cost impact on DPW of these additional improvements as opposed to just mowing that space? Has that been looked at or thought about?
There certainly will be, certainly a slight increase. We want to maintain it, but that's a question I do not know if Simon has talked with.
I could address that
Okay.
somewhat. Simon and I met with Park Foreman Dan Bennett, and we discussed obviously not wanting to make an impact or have extra work or whatnot. And we talked about the type of tree, the type of bush that wouldn't need a lot of maintenance. So essentially, it's still just going to be mowing in there. There's not going to be any other tree trimming or anything that would have to be done with that.
About watering of plantings in the flower bed?
Very, very hardy. We would try to pick bushes that wouldn't need a lot of watering. They may need a little bit at first, but once they are established, there's nothing to it.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? It's a great project, Simon. Thank you for bringing it forward. We have a motion to authorize. No further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And under discussion, we have any commission or committee reports from council members? Mr. Gearba.
The Saline Youth Council met last month for the first time, and we are getting underway. They're hoping to do a few fundraisers and looking for opportunities to support volunteerism and whatever. So if there's any events or things that are coming up, let me know, and we'll look forward to giving them some ideas. They are a very fired-up group this year, and looking forward to working with them.
Great.
The other item I had, Historic District Commission met and discussed again the issue regarding the problem with one of the builders, or one of the homeowners that replaced the windows without approval. And that is proceeding with an additional letter to the homeowner requesting some resolution be done, and if it's not, we'll have to proceed further with other legal ramifications.
Okay. Any other commissioner committee? Mr. Rhodes.
The Environmental Commission had a display at Harvest of the Arts this last Saturday, and we distributed a large amount of literature to patrons walking by, as well as collected names of people who were interested in potentially purchasing rain barrels, which would then become a revenue enhancement for the Environmental Commission. And also wanted to remind everyone that the next electronic waste recycling event is on November the 10th. It will be held at Houghton School this year, and it will be from 9 until 2, as opposed to previous times it was 9 to 4. But having that extra 2 hours at the end required working in the dark to finish loading things.
Extra daylight will help.
And that recycling event is open to everybody. You don't have to be a resident of the city of Saline. Anywhere in the country, you get it to us, we'll take it. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other reports, or commissioner and committee reports? Mr. Morrow?
Oh, no, it's a report or another announcement, excuse me, Mayor.
Okay, any commissioner and committee reports? If not, we have reports and other announcements. Oh, Mr. Morrow, sorry.
That's all right. I just want to talk briefly about something that Ms. Shupko alluded to, our Main Street Board President, or Chair, rather. And that is, last night at Stone Arch, we had the kickoff fundraiser for the Music Under the Arch Series 2012. It was actually a really delightful time. Great catered food from Zingerman's and a great jazz band and even better company. And so like Ms. Shupko said, I think it raised in excess of $5,000 for Music Under the Arch. And I just want to start planting the seed right now because Music Under the Arch, which will begin in January, is just a great initiative that really is a collaboration between Main Street and then also Stone Arch, which is owned by Walt and Nancy Byers. So I want to just give you a heads up. I hope that some of my council colleagues and those in the audience and those watching at home tonight will try and attend one of those concerts. Again, it's a great collaboration, and what makes it even better is that they all happen during the winter period when there is not as much activity and commotion around town. So again, be sure to check out Music Under the Arch 2013. Thank you.
Is there any other reports or announcements? Okay, if not, we do have, the NLC sent a letter about if anybody wants to go to the event on the first weekend at the end of November, early December. This is, I think we have until, then we can do this at the next meeting, but we just want to give heads up if there's anybody that wants to go to this meeting in Boston. It's they have 2 meetings, conferences every year. The fall one is like best practices, and it's a good opportunity to learn about what other communities are doing regarding all the different areas in local government from a local level. And then there's one in March that's in DC, and that's really what the federal government's doing and how to work with them better. And sort of what are the things we need to be watching carefully on and getting a chance to go down on the Hill and meet with a congressman. So that's sort of FYI. So if there is anybody, it is on the website, nlc.org, and if there's anybody that would want to go, there is a point in time. It's when the board does get elected at the end of on the Saturday morning. So if there's anybody that wants to go, they would be our delegate. And then we also have, there's been some interest expressed in possibly buying the Karpinski property, and we wanted to bring that forward. Mr. Campbell, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit?
Madam Mayor, if council decides to offer that property up for sale, I might have an interest in submitting a bid for it, so I think it's probably appropriate if I leave the bench during this discussion.
Okay.
Not about the audience.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's some apparent interest in that property, and so wanted to bring it. It's 207 Monroe Street, or formerly known as the Karpinski property, that the city purchased back in April of 2011 for the price of $100,000, and it's 3.53 acres plus or minus. You may recall it's adjacent to People's Park. And for many, many years, the city actually leased a portion of that property for parking for People's Park. And so that's where it's at. And I mean, certainly the market has way changed since then, but we do have, this is just for informational sake, obviously, but we do have an appraisal that was done back in September of 2008. Just before the world fell apart, and the property was valued at $220,000. So that's just some information on that, and wanted to open it to council to see if there's interest in maintaining status quo as we are currently, to hold on to it, or if there's interest in selling it, trying to determine a price, how would you want to go about that. Just wanted to get it out there for discussion.
Okay, comments? Ms. Tahar.
A question, is the interest in purchasing the whole property, or would the city keep the portion that's been devoted to parking for the park?
Well, there's interest in purchasing the whole piece. However, I would recommend that that we hold on to appropriate portion of that for parking, because otherwise I think we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. Or at the very, that's what I would prefer, but at the very minimum, in perpetuity easement of that, you know, for $1 or something, so we could maintain it. Because you may recall, we have a ingress and egress easement through what is now the daycare, so we can get in and out, and that's you know, on the deed for that easement for us. But like you said, my preference would be that we would maintain that amount, but at a minimum that we would have some sort of a permanent easement to allow that parking.
Right, thank you. That would be my preference as well.
Mr. Roth, did you have a comment?
My comment was very similar to hers. I'd like to see a split for the part that we leased in the past, be split. We maintain ownership of that, so we're no longer have to get in a leasing agreement.
Any further comment? Mr. Morrow?
Well, if what you're asking, or if the city manager is looking for consensus from council, my position was pretty clear 2 years ago. I didn't want it, I didn't think we needed it then, and I don't think we need it now. So I'm in favor with moving ahead and accepting bids from individuals who want to purchase that parcel.
If I might, Madam Mayor, so the question is, do we just open up an offer for, you know, kind of best offer? But again, obviously you could have the right to reject or refuse any bid or accept any bid, but
So we sort of had the same degree disagree that we did before, and being in real estate and this being like the lowest point in the market, I would suggest we work with a realtor, and I've been urging Mr. Campbell to do that with the rest of our properties, that we have quite a bit of real estate assets that I don't believe we're sufficiently marketing, and we've talked about that in our goal setting. So I believe that if we're going to put this back on the market, which I personally have very mixed feelings about, because this is the lowest point. However, we got it as steel, and it was there were reasons that we did what we did at the time. But I would strongly recommend that we get a professional realtor, and we ask them to help us market it and do it and try to get as much value out of it as possible if we do choose to go in that direction and not continue to market as a city. What we do best is city services, not real estate sales. And I think really across the board, we really need to talk about how we are managing our real estate assets. And I brought that up multiple times. So there's a lot of value out there that I know the economy's starting to turn around. I think there's going to be some opportunities, especially in Washtenaw County, in the near future. So I think we need to be really proactive and aggressive about that, because there's a lot of other communities that have land too. So, Mr. Gearbaugh.
I would concur with you on the professional approach and how we would handle it to make sure that we've done this. But really, I agree with Ms. Tahar and Mr. Roth that we should segregate off that chunk of property to maintain that we have the parking for that. That was really my original reason for doing that. I no longer wanted to have any leased property on that. So whatever lot we end up selling should be minus that, and to maintain the easement and get out of the easement agreement with that other property, which potentially could be something developed in the future too.
So I don't know if you're getting direction, Mr. Campbell. Mr. Morrow.
Well, Mayor, you're right. We just have to agree to disagree on the philosophical merits of acquiring the property. But as it relates to your suggestion about professionally marketing it, I wholeheartedly agree. And so if there is a consensus from council to market that property, I think, you know, it's far better to do that with a professional than to try and do it internally.
And we might want to talk to a realtor and talk to them about the pros and cons of selling it today versus waiting a year or two. You know, I know it would be helpful to our financial situation, so certainly, but again, you know, Mr. Gearby, I don't know if you have comments.
Right, just one other comment. I want to make sure that we also have looked at all our priorities that we potentially were going to use that property for. I want to make sure that we've taken those off the table at this point before we decide to put it up for sale.
This might need a work session, actually. I think we might need to get a professional to come in, or to at least do a proposal. They can do a general market appraisal. We don't have to pay for that. We could have somebody do a recommendation, and then we could probably do a work session around it. I don't know how the rest of the council, there's a lot of issues. I don't hear anybody being opposed to putting it on the market with the right circumstances. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is that correct down here too? Mr. Roth? Okay. Mr. Har?
I would appreciate, however, a work session with an expert to get more background. We aren't realtors. Most of us aren't.
So can you add that to your list of work sessions?
Absolutely.
Our list.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll try
Thank you,
next.
Mr. Rhodes. Is there any other discussion items? If not, under public comment, under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who'd like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, 600 Canterbury. I received my FYI paper with the ordinances of the month. We're working on trees now, and I think they have snow removal. Ordinances are very important, and I noticed in our paper the business that I had concerns about with the curb cuts is called Phillips M&D. It was in our newspaper. And looking at the ordinances, and hopefully the city manager will be able to bring us up to date as a citizen, there are many things more in the code that we shall do. The one of them is, of course, the curb cut shall have a permit by the city superintendent. There also is the standard that the curb cut shall be, residential drive approaches shall be 6 inches thick, commercial, of which this property is, and industrial approaches shall be 8 inches thick with mesh reinforcement. This is a commercial piece of property that has the crumbling sidewalks, and it is dangerous, and I am hoping that it is flagged with a yellow paint so that the citizens know that the city council and we are working on the ordinances. Another interesting ordinance was Section 5.16 on storage of junk auto parts, tires, and other waste. That's in all districts. And there's probably about 30 tires in the back that probably collect water, that collect mosquitoes, that could be carrying disease. Also, junk is a good harbor for rodents, and I think it is really, there's lumber back there, and I think that is another ordinance that I would wish that our city superintendent is obligated to do as far as ordinances. And I'm hoping the city attorney and the ordinance officer will enforce these ordinances. Thank you.
Is there any other citizen comments? Okay, is there any other business coming for us, City Council? If not, we have upcoming meetings. We are going to, sounds like we're going to be having regularly scheduled work meetings for the next few meetings. So October 15th is our next meeting, and we have a work meeting at 6:30 to talk about our wastewater. What are we talking about? The water?
Yeah, because we're finally getting to the Tetra Tech study to talk about on the 15th. Talk about that and the the capital improvement program as a whole as well, as far as the impact that the projects at the wastewater treatment plant will have and what we're looking at. So.
And based on discussion, so we have a meeting at 6:30 and the regular meeting at 7:30, and based on discussion tonight, November 13th, please plan on a work session. Let's tentatively say 6 p.m., maybe 6:30, but if you can put that on your calendar. discuss some of the things that came up tonight, and our regular meeting at 7:30. That is, we are doing a bye on the first meeting in November because of the election, and then we will be having a special meeting on November 17th. That will be to go through the attorney proposals and to move forward on that subject. So make sure all these are on your calendar. And do we have a motion to adjourn at 9:30?
So moved.
Second.
Move Morrow, second Kirby. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.